Welcome everyone. Today we have our another debate. We already get a huge response from the audience, from electronic media, even from the politician. They really like our debate. So I want to welcome all of you for the another debate shows, and this is definitely mock parliament. In this mock parliament, today's topic is this house believes that humans should invest in technologies, explore and colonize other planets. We have our uh, six speakers, three from governments. For today's parliament, we have our honorable prime ministers, Mr. Kennedy. We have our honorable minister of space affairs, Mr. Andreas. We have our member of the parliament from the government, Professor Paul. On the other hands, we have our oppositions. From the opposition side, we have our very strong opposition. Even you know that the last parliament they were in government, and that this parliament they go to the opposition side. I believe that this parliament will be very strong and competitive because opposition they want to gain again the government side, and hopefully this will be very competitive debate. So from the opposition we have our opposition leaders, Professor Rob, uh, deputy leaders from the opposition side, Professor Donalds, and very strong parliament members. He is a very experienced politician. He have experience from around the world, and most important thing is that in several times I lost debate against Mr. Marshall in real life. So Mr. Marshall is the leader of the parliament from the member of the parliament from the opposition side. So honorable prime minister of the parliament, what you want to propose and what you want to share with our audience in this parliament, Professor. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Sharif, and welcome to all. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and now it seems that the Transhumanist Party is in the government. The tables have turned since the debate 1 week ago, and as now the government party, we are proposing that the government fully embrace space travel and space colonization of other planets. This is aligned with the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform on the subject, which states that the United States Transhumanist Party holds that present and future societies should take all reasonable measures to embrace and fund space travel, not only for the spirit of adventure and to gain knowledge by exploring the universe, but as an ultimate safeguard to its citizens and transhumanity should planet Earth become uninhabitable or be destroyed. So let's explore the various portions of that stance. First of all, it's essential to consider the motivation for human progress that enhanced space travel and space colonization will provide. The problem is right now, contemporary societies are mired in a crisis of meaning that arose in the postmodern era. Unfortunately, as a result of the various crises of the 20th century, and as a result of many philosophers abandoning a hopeful vision for the future of humanity, there are few objectives that inspire people anymore. And that wasn't always the case. We have had eras in human history where entire populations were essentially glued to the television screen during the space age in the 1960s, when the United States launched humans into orbit, when the United States landed the first man on the moon, and likewise in the Soviet Union with the launch of Sputnik in 1957, with the launch of Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, in 1961. These kinds of achievements inspire people to pursue a better future, not just for humanity, but for themselves. They see what is possible, they see that improvement is possible, and that motivates them to lead their lives in more constructive ways, and that motivates them to pursue other innovations, including innovations that make life better here on Earth. Technology can be a source of great inspiration, as it had been during the development of railroads in the 19th century, during the development of electricity when Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla were popular heroes, during the development of automotive transport when Henry Ford was a popular hero, during the development of powered flight when the Wright brothers and Charles Lindbergh were popular heroes. And we need more heroes in our society in order to inspire people to live better and more hopeful lives. But it goes beyond this. Our species right now is at risk because we are confined to this one planet and we are dependent on what happens to this planet. We are sitting ducks for phenomena that are currently outside of our control, like major asteroid impacts or supervolcano eruptions or large climate shifts. And I agree that there are many approaches that are feasible to combat these kinds of phenomena, but space travel is an essential piece of this. If a large asteroid heads toward Earth, how are we going to deflect it? How are we going to neutralize the threat that it poses to the survival of our species? Right now, our means for doing that are woefully limited. But if we have a robust space infrastructure, if we have several orbital settlements, if we have stations on other planets, we could deploy measures much more readily to address that asteroid impact. And moreover, we diversify as a species. Even if some catastrophic event happens on Earth, that would not be the end of humanity. And indeed, the intact aspects of our species, the outposts that aren't affected by that event, could then assist any humans on Earth who are trying to recover. Now, there are also various resource issues that could be solved through space colonization, both through asteroid mining and through colonizing other planets. We could get many more precious metals, which are in limited supply here on Earth, but we could export them from the asteroids and the other planets to Earth. And furthermore, we could address various issues like climate change. For instance, if there are factories that emit carbon dioxide or other undesirable substances into the Earth's atmosphere right now, perhaps in the future, a lot more of those factories could be based in outer space or on other planets. And that way, we don't have to emit these substances into the Earth's atmosphere nearly as much. Eventually, we could solve essentially all of the Earth's energy needs through devices like the Dyson sphere. Essentially, we could harness the entire energy of the sun for useful purposes. Right now, the vast majority of the sun's energy that reaches the Earth is just dissipated. There have been so many technologies that benefited life here on Earth that arose as a result of space colonization. And the following technologies are acknowledged by NASA as having been developed in large part due to the current efforts over the past several decades in space travel, space exploration, various research that has been done in space. These include ventricular assist devices for heart transplant patients, cochlear implants, LASIK eye surgery, artificial limbs, the use of light-emitting diodes in medical therapies, aircraft anti-icing systems, and even 3D printing of foods, which began as a NASA-funded project. So a lot of technologies that help patients live longer lives, overcome injuries and disabilities, and also a lot of technologies that can help solve some of the resource issues that are facing humans today, including perhaps the prospect of sustainable food production at home for everybody going forward. These are offshoots of space travel and space exploration efforts. And surely if we accelerate those efforts, we are going to get more of these technological innovations diffusing to the human population here on Earth. So not only is space travel and space colonization good in itself as a motivator for progress and as a way of expanding the reach of the human species, but the benefits to all of the humans who remain on Earth are going to be immense. Therefore, the U.S. Transhumanist Party proposes that we embrace space travel and space colonization fully and devote maximum available quantity of resources to that endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister of the Parliament. And this is very good news from World Economic Forum's Honorable Secretary Generals. He also joined as an observer and debate analyst for today's debate. This is very important. Even he is a experienced politician. He ran very important global organization. Thank you, Professor Talib, for joining today's session. After finishing the debate, you will give some analysis, and I'm sure our audience really enjoy today's debate. And beside that, we will decide winner or loser after the show, not inside the show. So now time for opposition. Opposition is a very strong. They try to come to the power again. They are doing a lot of field work and social work. So we have our opposition leaders of the parliament, Professor Rana.
So Parliament's brought forward the proposition that we should invest in other technologies and explore space. It's interesting to note that they didn't cover the other technologies much at all. They focused almost entirely on the exploration of space, which is certainly an important thing for civilization to look towards. But I would argue, or we would argue, that it is not something this country should take a position in. It's expensive. NASA, even with the capital investment of companies like SpaceX, has a budget of $22.5 billion currently. It's the U.S. able to spend that kind of money. We can't even spend that kind of money on re-educating our people. And really, if we look at our priorities right now in country, they are, as you would expect, keeping our people employed, providing medicine, providing healthcare, providing clean water, and helping people live a healthful, capable life. And we're not meeting that requirement at the moment. This idea of going to space to escape the planet certainly sounds interesting, but if we took the same amount of effort and we actually worked to heal the planet and make the planet more livable, it would probably provide greater short-term returns. If we pollute the planet and destroy where we live before we can find another place to go, we're still pretty much messed up. The difficulty here is with regard to priorities. Yes, NASA has put forth a number of technologies up through 2016 and 3D printed food, but we don't have the capability of even manufacturing those technologies in our country yet. We have a lack of educated engineers. Our diversity programs are just getting started, and our minorities, and particularly women, are underutilized. Our money would be better spent fixing the problems that we have that are prevalent, as opposed to trying to distract the populace with a space program we cannot afford. It would be different if we had a place we could go that was close and achievable. Because I certainly agree with the idea of preserving the race is extremely important. But we have yet to identify a habitable planet that is within reasonable range of the Earth. And if we can't even locate a place that we could go, then funding the effort to get there seems to be money poorly spent. Much better to look at the priorities that we have to keep government in place and operating. If the population revolts because they don't have food, because we can't get them vaccines, because we can't keep them healthy, we're not going to be able to make our space program work anyway. Much better to let the advanced nations spend their money on these programs, and perhaps we have our educational facilities participate in some remote way, but it is not a priority. Our priorities are very terrestrial in nature. And looking at technology in general, which is the part that the Parliament put forward, the Prime Minister put forward, that too is problematic. We lack the skills capable of installing the technology, servicing the technology, and making the best use of technology. We only have to look at countries like Africa, Iran, and most recently Afghanistan to see what can happen if the support from the centralized, from the supplying government goes away. Governments change. And so depending on a high technology company to come in and help us with government support for long periods of time may work over the short term, but for the long term, we'd be beholden to those governments. And this time around, it's not the UK, Spain, or France. Well, I should say England, Spain, or France. We'll probably be looking at Russia and China, and we all know the problems of taking money from those countries. They come with significant payback requirements that subordinate us to those countries. And I would argue that we want our government to support our citizens. We don't want our government to support some other government or some other location's citizens. We want our government to support the problems we have here, not become subordinated to another country. That is not our purpose in being. We need to make sure that our people are healthy. We need to make sure our people are educated. We need to make sure that our water is clean. We need to make sure that our government is solid and sound, and that they support our people, not everyone else. I mean, for instance, look at the pandemic as it exists today. We do not have manufacturing capability to build the vaccines in country. If something happens to one of the suppliers outside of country, we're just going to be hit by the vaccine. And look how this virus came in. This virus came in from other countries. We didn't have the virus come up here. It came in over from overseas, and we lacked the protections to keep our people safe. We need to fix that problem first. And then we can think about things like exploring space, and even exploring space. We haven't even explored our oceans yet, and there certainly we've discovered in the oceans and in the forests medicines and capabilities that we are also just learning about, and that have a much higher near-term potential given our current socioeconomic level. So I object to the position the government has taken. It is certainly fine for a country that prints money and has excess budget to consider things like space exploration or just investing in technology in general. But our needs are more fundamental. We have people that are sick. We have people that are starving. We have people that are homeless. We are having a hard time keeping our citizens safe. As we've discovered from the pandemic, and we need to fix that first. That has to be our priority, not sending people into space. Though there are a few people in government that I would certainly like to send there. That is not our priority. We need to focus on our people. We need to focus on the here and now, because that's where our current problems reside.
Thank you, Honorable Opposition Leader of the Parliament, for your speech. Now I request Andreas. He's also a Minister of the Parliament, Minister of Space Affairs. We are observing all of the very young and energetic Parliament. Actually, they took over the government side. So hopefully this will be very interesting. And beside that, the peoples from those who are observing this Parliament, they have different questions. So if you have time, beside your debate, you can respond. Honorable Minister of Space Affairs.
Thank you. Yeah. So basically, what the opposition said so far, it did make a lot of sense, and there were some great concerns. But the thing is actually that if you look at NASA's return on investment on what they're actually spending, their budget, then for every single dollar that they're actually spending on everything that they do and develop, they actually get back somewhere between $7 and $14 into the economy, and that's just based on all the technologies and licensing and all these different kinds of ways that NASA is actually spending their money, and this is actually just in the U.S. So if you just look at the world globally, it will have likely a much greater return on investment than just between $7 to $14. If you just really look at all the technologies and all the progress that comes from that, and the thing is also that the Prime Minister also alluded to was also that in space, so many exponential technologies, they're actually first developed in space because they have to go for something radical and something different to make it work there, because it's just completely different way of going about things, and they just don't have the same capabilities that we actually have on Earth, and that actually means that a lot of really important technologies that we're using today have been developed in space, such as things in medicine, such as a CAT scan, an X-ray, and also different technologies to clear blockages in one's veins during heart surgery. So there are a ton of different technologies that have come from space and have been developed there, and that also was mentioned by the Prime Minister, like in terms of things such as food production and 3D printing and all that. Like so if you just look at those technologies and the impact of that, then there is certainly a lot to take away and a lot to gain from it all. And even things which we take for granted today, such as cell phones and GPS signal and all that, it comes from space. So if we hadn't explored space and gone out there, then we actually wouldn't be able to communicate in the way that we are used to doing today, and our world wouldn't be as global and as collaborative as it is in some aspects today. So there have definitely been a lot of benefits from doing all this, and also if you just think about the future potential of developing new technologies and finding new discoveries that we can use here on our Earth. Also, in terms of global warming, for instance, there have been a lot of beneficial discoveries in terms of how scientists can figure out ways to reduce emissions from space, and also pictures from space have actually been very beneficial to really analyze what is going on in different parts of the world, and also just based on future exploration, it's hard to know what we'll actually find and all the benefit that we can gain from that in terms of other planets, in terms of different compounds, like all kinds of the metals, what we can find and use on Earth. The thing is also that our resources aren't infinite. So if we're just using our own resources that are really crucial for our future development, then we can find a lot of different materials and find additional materials of what we're currently really needing on Earth. So there are a lot of different things that people don't really consider when they actually think about the big cost of exploring space and to just go for new discoveries there. But the thing is that there's so many benefits, and it's hard to predict the future for it. But the thing is, if we currently have already gained so much from it, and we haven't even colonized any planets so far, it's just interesting to think about how much more progress we can gain from colonizing different planets in the future.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of the Parliament, for your excellent speech. And now I request Deputy Leader of the Parliament, Professor Donald. Can you unmute, please?
Hi there. I want to back in a little bit to what Rob started with. But before I do, there's been several questions, and the Honorable, I forget which, previous speaker just talked about, which is colonization of planets. When you think about the solar system that we live in, there's 9 planets, maybe 8, depending on whether you consider Pluto a planet or not. And the only one that has any possibility of us colonizing in any meaningful way is Mars. And Mars does have an atmosphere that's incredibly less than Earth's. It's like 5 times less than if you went to the top of Mount Everest, where people can barely breathe, only certain people can, and then went 5 times as high, you'd be the atmosphere of Mars. And there's this idea, science fiction idea of what's called terraforming it. And the idea is that you use certain kinds of bacteria that can actually live in circumstances like that produce oxygen and use the dry ice, which is carbon dioxide, that lives on Mars. And from that carbon dioxide in the water that's there, you produce enough oxygen that eventually you create an atmosphere there, and that atmosphere is enough that it starts trapping heat. And the carbon dioxide, you produce enough carbon dioxide. There's a question if there's enough carbon dioxide available to actually do that. So we don't really know. Many people think there isn't. And so that would be a dicey proposition there in the first place. And the second problem is that Mars doesn't really have a magnetic field. So the solar wind would blow the atmosphere away, and it would be very difficult to keep it there. So that's really not, it's very questionable whether that's actually possible at all or not. So really what you'd have to do is to create a colony there is to have air-proof domes and somehow get the oxygen into those domes. And, in theory, you could do it using photosynthesis or some sort of means where you could continue to produce oxygen. But in order to do that, you'd have to get the materials there to build it. So it'd be extremely expensive, and it would also be something that would be very difficult to maintain because you'd have to keep getting the materials there. The idea that we could produce factories, we'd have factories there that would produce the CO2 instead of on Earth. Well, the CO2 on Earth is produced by fossil fuels. So we'd have to get the fossil fuels to Mars somehow so that we'd be able to burn them. And that, of course, would be incredibly expensive as well. So really, in reality, it isn't, it's the costs for it are exorbitant, and it's hard. There's no way in any conceivable way that we could get a return on our investment. And the nearest planet is that could conceivably have life on it is 4.5 light years away. They're called exoplanets, and what they are is they're planets that are close enough to the sun and far enough away from the sun that they're in what we call the Goldilocks zone, which is the close enough and far enough away that they aren't too hot or they aren't too cold. And the closest one that we know of is 4.5 light years away. And at the speeds that we go, it would take generations to get there. So the idea of being able to colonize other planets is basically, it's science fiction. It's a wonderful idea, and it's an exciting idea, but the costs of it and the return on the investment are just not there. And as I said, I was going to back into Rob's idea, which is that the problems that we're faced with are real. Global warming. I don't know if you've seen the movie Don't Look Up. I really can't recommend it too highly, but it's basically a metaphor where the Earth is about to get hit by a giant comet and destroyed, and people just don't pay attention to it. And I won't tell you the end, but that's sort of the situation that we're in right now. And I'm very interested in sociology, and there was a sociologist named Lester Ward who had the idea that we couldn't control society. We didn't really know what changes we could make that would solve all of our problems, but we knew enough now to try things that could possibly work and find out if they worked, and if they didn't, we could try something else. And we know enough now that we actually have things that we could try. And it would be, since we can do it, it's kind of immoral that we don't. And we need to start putting our resources into the kinds of things that we can do to start making a difference. So the idea that people are glued to their television set watching rockets take off, is that a good thing? Why is it a good thing that people are sitting around glued to their television sets? That to me is a danger. We need to have the people in the world not outside working together with each other, loving each other and trying to make a difference, to make the world a better place, to learn, to grow, to make the changes that we need to make our world not get hit by a comet, not get destroyed. And we don't need to try and live on planets that we really can't live on. We need to make this planet a place that we can live, and do it as soon as we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Leader of the Parliament from the opposition side. Now I request a member of the Parliament from the government, Professor Paul. Can you unmute, please? Professor Paul, can you unmute?
Yeah, sorry. Error 101, forgetting to unmute. So if you look at science fiction from a few decades ago, science fiction novels, they were full of wonderful new technologies that we haven't heard of. Some of them are coming into existence now, but they were full of hope, it seems to me, for the future. And if you look at science fiction now, it's almost exclusively dystopian, dying planet, losing everything that humans have worked for, losing human consciousness even, and so why is the switch there? Well, part of the reason for the switch is the things like the pandemic and the problems that we face with inequality, with poverty, with, of course, the risks to human society, continuance from abrupt climate system change, which is getting more and more, people are having more and more understanding. It's not just the crazy alarmists, so-called alarmists. It's, the public is getting very concerned, in fact, such that young women are often reluctant to have any children because they're not sure what world we're coming into. So what we're lacking is hope for the future. Humanity really needs a common goal to unite it, and it can have this common goal through, collective sort of, work towards some project, some enormous project. And, what project could be better than expanding humanity's presence in the universe to, go out into space, to try to colonize other planets, to try to provide, as Elon Musk calls it, planetary diversity. If you look at some of the, greatest thinkers of our time, if you look at some people like Stephen Hawking and some, top environmentalist people, they're really thinking that humanity is on its way out, that we don't have a, that we're all heading in the wrong direction. So, we have always been in our history an exploration species, whether it be, crossing seas to explore unknown lands, to go to the polar regions of the earth, to go down to the deep depths of the sea, to go to the tops of mountains. And we've always been an exploration species, and why should that stop, I guess? It seems to be built into the human brain, the human psyche. We have, definite novelty filters where we need to feel like we're advancing. We need new things. And, the goal, we need some very so-called sexy goals. I mean, we have goals to eliminate poverty on the earth, to provide food for everybody, but those goals are somewhat, they're important, but they don't really stimulate the imagination, the human imagination, like space exploration does. And, as many of the great speakers have said, the technology spin-offs from space exploration were enormous in with past exploration, and will likely become, much, even more unlimited with future exploration. And, we're not, as we have this debate, there's people on the planet, obviously, that are putting forward the companies and the action to actually achieve what we're talking about. So it's not really a hypothetical thing. Specifically, the advancements of SpaceX in the last few years have been arguably, exponential, with the Starship launches and successful landings, the ability, on a routine basis to send up rockets, to put satellites in orbit, etc., to get global communication systems. And one of the big problems facing us, on the Earth with climate change is, sure, we need to, zero fossil fuel emissions, and getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies will go a long way towards that. But governments continue to cling to this fossil fuel economy with their subsidies. So we've gone far beyond the point where slashing fossil fuel emissions will be sufficient to stabilize the climate of the planet. We also need technologies to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And one very good point was made that with putting industry that creates emissions up into space will, allow the Earth to recover, not to have an atmosphere and ocean, that is completely saturated with greenhouse gases. So, but in order to have time to do these things, we have to address the huge warming of the planet. And some of the ideas are marine cloud brightening, to brighten clouds over the oceans to reflect sunlight away, or to put MEER is a project, MEER, to distribute mirrors on the surface of the Earth to reflect solar radiation. But it seems to me that the simplest way to reflect some of the sunlight to cool the planet would be to have a vast area, very, very thin mylar sheet, highly reflective, coated, aluminized, or with a gold film. And this would be an extremely low volume and lightweight device, but it would have an enormous ability to reflect away a small fraction of a percent of the incoming sunlight, to allow the Earth to cool, to give us time to deploy these technologies to remove carbon dioxide and methane from the atmosphere, for example. So all of these things are kind of connected. We have very deep existential questions on the planet, and but I think hope is part of the human condition. Humans need to have hope, or they need to have reasons to get up in the morning, to look forward to our future. And exploration of space is a way to provide that hope and give humanity a common goal, to unite it and to move forward.
Thank you, Professor Paul, for your excellent debate. We have our another debate analyst, Mr. David Schumacher. Thank you for joining today's session. Now I request member of the parliament from opposition side, Mr. Marshall.
Well, thank you, Sharif, and thank you for my fellow parliamentarians. As a member of the loyal opposition, I'd like to point out that the debate point is not whether we deploy technology in space, it's whether we spend the assets that we have now to go into outer space and populate other locations and other planets. As we know, Elon Musk has already made statements to the effect that his target is Mars. And my fellow parliamentarians have pointed out, as Donald pointed out and Rob pointed out, Mars has issues with it, especially for now. Will they be overcome? I'm sure they can be overcome. We've overcome a lot of things in life. But I find it quite ironic that the Transhumanist Party, the members of the government, want to go into outer space when their very own members back in the 90s advocated that their focus on technology was okay, as was presented in Julian Huxley's essay on that name, which created the Transhumanist Party. But Natasha Vita, who was one of your early members, she said that her party was too neurotically geared towards environmentalism. And here you're focusing money on space. And as we've all pointed out, including your own members, Paul, the Honorable Paul, and Gennady, and everybody has been mentioning the fact that we are faced with a existential threat of climate change and a climate crisis. And this is real. This is not something that somebody made up. Of course, there are plenty of people who think we've made this up, but the science is in. It's there. And not only that, I take umbrage with what the Honorable Member of Parliament Paul mentioned about that going into space will help us address climate change. Well, yes, it might, but we have real solutions here and now on Earth. And yes, there's a return on investment by NASA that the head of the government, Gennady, showed and actually enumerated the return on investment in $14 for every dollar invested. But I think what we're proposing, the honorable opposition, is that we need to invest in the here and now, practically, to recover the planet from its problems. Now, if you want to send up a spaceship to deploy a satellite that will help us get information about the planet, that's one thing. But the premise of the argument and the debate today is about going to other planets. Well, that's not going to help us right now. And time is of the essence. The Thwaites Glacier is melting, whether you like it or not. It's built in, it's baked into the planetary problems. And you're not going to change it by going into outer space. What will change it is deploying technologies that we have here and now to remediate GHG emissions, lowering the carbon footprint, lowering the temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And we know it's possible. Is it possible in time to change what's already baked in? Probably not. But certainly spending assets and money in going to outer space and going to another planet, which will take certainly a decade, if not more, of energy and effort. And NASA is not going to do it. The people that are trying to do it are SpaceX. In other words, Amazon's founder, Virgin Atlantic founder, and Elon Musk are the ones that are making the headway right now. But their funds are meager compared to what needs to be deployed to change the planet's climate crisis now, in the here and now. So as the member of the loyal opposition, I would propose that we take those funds and we allocate them as GFANs, which is an allocation of a group of financial entities and governments to solve the climate crisis now after COP26, to get to a net zero now, not in outer space. Putting factories in outer space, great, but that's not going to change what we have here and now. You're not going to change global warming by going into outer space. You're going to change global warming by allocating assets to technologies that exist here and now to lower GHG emissions, improve soil health, improve water quality, improve the quality of life for humans on this planet here and now. On this planet, not on some other planet. By the time you get to that other planet, it'll be too late. If you look at Times Square, where this New Year's tonight, they're going to be counting down the clock for New Year's. Everybody follows it around the world. But there's another clock that's counting down. It's at 14th Street, Union Square in New York City, and it's counting down the climate clock. We have less than 7 years. We have less than 5 years, essentially. Well, we have a little more than 5 years about left on the climate clock. And what is that counting down? It's counting down the point of no return where we cannot recover. But we can. We have the opportunity. Just reallocate the assets and the funds and the energy instead of going to outer space, which is admirable. Nobody has a problem with going to outer space in the sense of science fiction or in the sense of getting there when we get there. But if we're going to save our planet and our people and our time, we need to allocate those assets here. One thing I'd like to point out, the approach that we, the loyal opposition, take is, yes, people come first, planet comes next, profits come last. And you can have profits. There is ability to get profitability out of the climate crisis if we address the climate crisis in a transparent and honorable way. But we need to do it here and now, not in some future idea of going in, launching colonies into outer space. What about the rest of the planet? Think of all the people watching here now. Are you going to be in outer space? Is your children or your grandchildren going to be on that colony and be saved? We don't have the time for that. So I would argue, along with my Prime Minister Rob and our Minister Donald, that our party advocates the ability to act now, but not in outer space. Take the $130 trillion that GFANS has allocated for climate change in A&R for here on this planet, not in outer space, not on some other planet. Mars is not going to work. If you think it's going to work, then I think you're in a science fiction world. And that's okay, but what about your descendants and their descendants? Are they going to be around here? We don't have time. So I would say that it's time to take the bull by the horns, as we say, and allocate the assets and money towards real solutions that exist here and now. How do I know? I am part of companies that have those solutions. We have the ability to risk mitigate the climate crisis. We have the ability to risk mitigate the health crisis that come about because of the climate crisis. We have the ability to address all these issues here and now on this planet. And yes, it's great to fantasize about going into outer space, but that is a fantasy, not a reality. It's real. We see people like Elon Musk. His goal is to take phosphates out of Mars and bring them back to Earth. He's even stated that publicly to increase fertilizer. But is that what we need? Do we need that approach to improving our soil health? I don't think so. I think that is a very expensive proposition. There's a simpler proposition here and now to take waste, pyrolyze it into soil amendments that would allow us to make a circular economy as opposed to the current economy we have of an industrial economy where we take everything and throw it out the window and don't recover it. We need to do what Europe has done, create the mission to create a circular economy, to go back to environmentalism, even though your own parliamentarian back in the 90s poo-pooed that, thinking that you guys are neurotic. Well, I think the neurosis has gone to space. That's what's happened. So we need to take a proactive approach on this planet here and now to take everything that we are doing and make better jobs, more wealth, more food that is healthy food for people to consume, and create good paying jobs for people around the world. It doesn't have to be just in the United States. It can be around the world. It can be in Malaysia. It can be in Bangladesh. It can be in Pakistan. It can be in India. It can be in Southeast Asia, or Asia. Everywhere we are on this planet, we are threatened with a climate crisis that is here and now and approaching us at lightning speed. faster than any rocket ship that you're going to send up into outer space, or that Elon Musk is sending up to outer space. So I think the time is of the essence. I believe that our head of government, the loyal opposition, Rob, and my fellow minister have pointed out, Donald has pointed out, that the actions have to take place on Earth, not in outer space. Outer space is great. It does help us create new technologies. We acknowledge that. But the technologies that we're using now to create the ability to turn around the climate crisis were created here on Earth, not in outer space. Yes, I acknowledge, medical advancements and transplants and things like that came out of NASA, and we need that. Nobody's saying we shouldn't allocate funds to NASA, but if you look at the 3 private enterprises that are going into outer space, and you got Elon Musk being accused by the Chinese that he's causing traffic jams in outer space, and outer space is so huge. So why is that occurring? That's because people are not thinking with their gray cells. They're thinking emotionally, and they're trying to get to outer space because it's, again, as the government has pointed out, it's science fiction. It gives hope to people. That's fine. But we have undersea water problems that needs to be explored. You want to allocate assets for exploration. Look at our planet. I just saw on a LinkedIn post a picture of the planet, of the Pacific Ocean. You know how we always see North America or Europe or Africa or the Middle East as the picture of that part of the planet? This showed the Pacific Ocean. It's all water. We are 3/4 water. We are water. We need to solve those problems. So there's acidification occurring in the oceans. If you want to solve the problems on this planet, going to outer space, yeah, it may help, but it's too little too late. We need to take what we have now and apply it on this planet here and now. So I say, along with my Prime Minister Rob and my Minister Donald, that as the loyal opposition, we say, stop your neurosis, like your own advocate in the beginning of the 90s said, but come back to environmentalism, come back from outer space, come back down to Earth. We are on planet Earth. Everybody watching here is not in outer space. They're on planet Earth, and they're being affected by a pandemic that is created on planet Earth that could be solved by planet Earth. So we can create the ability to prevent zoonotic diseases like the pandemic. We can do other things that are all connected to the environment and solve this environmental crisis and get people back to a true humanism that is people first, planet next, and profits last. I rest my case.
Thank you. Honorable speaker from the opposition side. This is very close debate. I believe that from the government and opposition, they are doing excellent job. And there's a good news that we have our observer from even United Nations, Professor Talib, as well as we have our politicians, Mr. David Schumacher. After the debate, we will get some feedback from them. But I'm sure this debate is very, very close. And I think that we can decide after the rebuttal round. So first, I request from the opposition side, opposition leader of the parliament, Professor Rob.
So the government has proposed we go out into space and go to places like Mars. Let's just take one example of the problem I'm putting forward. Studies have showcased that while Mars may be cheaper to get to, living there will be far more difficult than Venus. We should, in fact, be going to Venus if we're going to another planet to preserve the race, because on Venus you don't need spacesuits and you don't need a magnetic field because it's already got one and it's already got an atmosphere. Yeah, you'd need oxygen, but living on the planet would be far easier than it would be on Mars long term. Yet we're going to Mars because it's cheaper, and the reason we're going to Mars because it's cheaper is maybe we can mine some minerals and bring them back to the U.S. and manufacture them. And of course, we know manufacturing is accounting for 23% of the carbon dioxide we're pouring into the atmosphere. It was argued that we can take that manufacturing off planet. That would be great, except once again, that's only 23% of the carbon dioxide. The vast majority of our pollution is coming from things like agriculture, which we could also move off planet, but just think of the logistics costs of the food. Our people who are having a hard time affording the food of today would be completely unable to afford the food of tomorrow, which would be pointless. Our argument is we have a series of problems we have to address here domestically that are causing people to die now. The going off into space may solve a problem of an asteroid impact where we could escape the Earth, except right now we don't even have a foolproof way, and certainly not in this country, of even identifying an asteroid that could hit the planet, let alone being able to prepare and get people on board and get them off planet someplace else that is safe. So what the Parliament is proposing is yet another distraction from the problems that we have today, to spend money on technology and capabilities that we can't use. We lack the skills to take advantage of, and our people are dying of problems that we can fix. We can control pollution. We can clean the water. We can find ways to manufacture the medicines we need in country. But to do that, we need the funds. And if those funds are going to some space program in the hope that we will develop something comparable to SpaceX, I mean, even NASA hasn't been able to develop something comparable to SpaceX. Why don't we just let SpaceX be SpaceX and solve the problems we have here today, where we need the help, where we need the funding, and where the people that put us in office expect us to spend our time. When they're safe and we have free funds, I'm all for going into space and playing around out there. But until then, I think we ought to focus on our people and keeping them safe, keeping them healthy, and keeping them productive. The opposition.
Thank you, honorable leader of the Parliament from the opposition side. Now I request for the closing remarks, Honorable Prime Minister of the Parliament. Before I give him floor, I request, like, after this Parliament, maybe you can develop some committee, like climate change committees or any kind of development committee, and you can give some chance to our opposition member of the Parliament. Maybe they can serve for your committee, and they can create a better economy and better sustainable economy for your country. So now I request Honorable Prime Minister of the Parliament, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sharif, and we would certainly be happy to maintain an ongoing dialogue with our loyal opposition. Hopefully, in the course of that dialogue, I will be able to convince the loyal opposition that it has established a false dichotomy between the benefits of going to outer space and the need to solve problems here on Earth, because the two are not mutually exclusive. And the decisive answer to the opposition's critique is, why not do both? Why not do everything? The opposition claims that there are budgetary constraints. However, if we think about the situation differently, the constraints may well go away. For instance, in the United States, the Defense Department and related activities account for roughly half of all discretionary spending. And by contrast, only 0.5% of the US federal budget, or $22.6 billion, as the opposition pointed out, was provided to NASA. So clearly there is ample room to expand the budget for space exploration and colonization. Indeed, it was approximately 4.5% at the time of the moon landing in 1969, and using much more basic technology than what we have right now at our fingertips in the form of our mobile phones. Humankind was able to land people on the moon, and yet we haven't been back on the moon for nearly 50 years. And the advanced technology that we have developed in the meantime will make the task a lot easier. Now, the honorable opposition member, Mr. Marshall, pointed out a statement made in the 1990s by transhumanist Natasha Vita-More. For the record, I would like to state that she was making that remark about the neurotic focus on environmentalism with regard to the Green Party, because she instrumentally ran as a member of the Green Party for the city council in Los Angeles, and she became disillusioned with the Green Party and resigned that position precisely because she thought that the Green Party wasn't forward-thinking enough in terms of considering creative solutions to environmental problems, rather than just focusing in the most direct way possible on those problems. But the fact is, you cannot solve major problems like the environmental problems that face our species using the same technology, the same thinking, the same status quo attitudes that led those problems to come about. You need a different approach, and that different approach is to push outward the boundaries of human possibility, to create a robust space infrastructure that could then be deployed to help us solve those environmental problems. Will the space infrastructure be the complete solution? No, there are complementary approaches that can't be deployed here on Earth, as the opposition pointed out, but I don't think that takes away from the government's case in this situation at all. So there were examples provided of exploring our oceans or developing manufacturing capabilities in developing countries that currently don't have those capabilities. We can do that too. There have been statements made about healing the planet. Well, why not do that simultaneously? Education, employment, medicine, healthcare, clean water. Humans can be inspired to provide all of those if they see a positive trajectory for our species, which is what space exploration and colonizing other planets will provide. The opposition has stated we have yet to identify a habitable planet, and the nearest exoplanet that might be habitable is 4.5 light years away. Well, why not create our own habitats? Designs for orbital habitats like the Stanford Torus or the O'Neill cylinder have existed since the 1970s. It's just a matter of deploying the resources to actually bring them into being. The opposition has stated that in many countries, people lack the skills capable of installing, servicing, and making the best use of this technology. Well, we respond that this does not preclude investments in technology education. Indeed, when technologies are available, when people see a growth industry, they will want to learn more about those technologies and become adept at them. Think about the many highly capable programmers that have arisen out of developing countries where there isn't a great internet infrastructure, there isn't a lot of access to digital technologies compared to more advanced countries, and yet these people learn the skills because they want to better their lives, and often they provide the IT workforce of more developed countries as well. So if the technological capabilities become available anywhere, I think people everywhere will want to be interested in them. And finally, because I understand our time is limited, the opposition pointed out to the Don't Look Up film as an example of the urgency of the situation that faces our species. Well, I would like to note that the Don't Look Up film literally deals with an asteroid impact that is about to affect the Earth. And indeed, we could be suffering from such an asteroid impact. We don't know when, but it would behoove us to improve our asteroid detection capabilities and invest ample resources, because this is the kind of existential risk that could wipe out our human species. It's even more dire than climate change. So I would suggest it is a moral imperative for our species to overcome that existential risk, and all of the other benefits that stem from space exploration and colonizing other planets are added bonuses compared to preserving humanity. And with that, I hope that we in the Transhumanist Party, as the government, have illustrated the vital importance of colonizing other worlds and greatly expanding our investment into space exploration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Actually, we want to see you as a Prime Minister of any of the parliament, especially as a president in USA. And besides all of the speakers actually doing very well. I think our audience really excited that how, and they bring a lot of questions, and our speakers and the parliament member, they actually respond many of the questions. And we are really happy that how they actually attend in the debate, how they take their preparations. This is very close debate, and we have our honorable debate analyst. He's a real successful politician. He was the ministers of Jordan, as well as he was Secretary General of UN WTO. Now he's also Secretary General of World Tourism Organization. This is part of World Economic Forum. Our great leaders, Professor Talib. Professor Dr. Talib, what you want to add for today's discussion? You are honorable
Thank you so much.
speaker.
Thank you so much, Sharif, for this
Yes.
very interesting session. I want to say two things here. We should distinguish between the priorities, as the Prime Minister said, of doing outer space excavation or not, and the need to do that. In other words, I'm not against the opposition when they say there are more urgent problems that we need to look at here. But if we have the funds, and we will have the funds, we should do both, as the Prime Minister said, because we can't stop technology. Technology, to me, opens so many possibilities, so many avenues. And it is not right. I'm not a scientist to decide whether it's Venus or Mars, Professor Rob. I don't know. You decide on that. But what I know is that we can't stop the hope in technology. We can't stop the technology from moving forward. Yes, of course, there are problems on Earth now. Climate change, employment, poverty, inequality. All of these issues must be addressed. These are priorities, of course, but especially the developing countries, developing world. But that doesn't mean that we should stop our technological advancements. And space, to me, is another technological advancement. It creates hope and imagination in the minds of people, and we need that. We need that badly. We can't live without it, even if we decide not to. It's going to happen anyhow, because people are going to continue to establish new facts on the ground. This is the story of technology. Since mankind became mankind, we can't stop the flow of technology. And space is now the new technological venture. So that's what I want to say. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prime Minister. I completely agree with you. You can do both. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Professor Dr. Talib. And we want to see that many of our parliament members, they can serve for different developing nations, and maybe you have a lot of opportunities or you have scope to utilize our human resources for the global community. So I really impressed how you support World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you, Professor Dr. Talib. We have another highly experienced politician. He contribute a lot for the politics, Mr. David Schumacher, and he has different views. Even though I know he is from Transhumanist Party, but I feel that for his comments, he is not biased for the prime ministers. He will be neutral, and he will give his opinions for this parliament.
Yes, thank you, Sharif. And you're correct. I think that's a good introduction and a good representation of my viewpoint. So as I've listened to both sides of this argument, I am actually very, very encouraged by the passion that I see from the different points of view. And I think that here is the real key as far as I'm concerned. Let's harness the passion of those here on Earth. Let's harness the passion of those who view going into space. And let's not just limit the discussion to that. Let's harness the passion that people have for making humankind, the planet, the solar system, wherever we go, better. Because when we do that, when we harness that passion, it's like a ship moving, and it has energy behind it. And we can make changes in navigation based on what we learn, and we can direct resources based on what we learn. But the passion is actually the fuel. It's what keeps it driving forward. So as others have said, let's not do one, let's do both.
Yes.
How much of both do we do? How much fuel do we have? Keep fueling it with that passion. Let's learn and let's keep talking among both sides. And actually, there's more than two sides to this argument. There's many nuances in all of this. Let's keep talking in that network and make each other's proposition better as one side contributes back to the other side. Let's do both.
Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher, for your excellent contribution for World Talent Economy Forums. First, I want to say Happy New Year to all of our honorable speakers for this parliament. And beside that, today we just finished our 450 episode. And definitely, this achievement actually we get because of all of the speakers, more than 300 speakers from 100 different countries, they join in World Talent Economy Forums and they continuously support World Talent Economy Forum. And this is our objective. We want to create open dialogues as well as we want to develop a better community, especially for the developing world. You know that we have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of issues that we need to be solved. And definitely we need people like you. We need more speakers like you. And especially I'm really impressed how actually all of the speakers actually they share their views, they share their opinions, and they share their dialogue in this parliament. Especially this is very good learning for the developing world. Especially developing nations has major problem in politics and policy development. So I believe those who join in today's dialogue and today's parliament in the future, they will contribute in their country, in the parliament, inside the parliament. This is very important because I learned from Professor Talib, politics is very important. We should not avoid politics. We have to engage with politics, and we have to solve problem through the political organizations. So this is the one of the excellent example that how we can create more effective debate inside the parliament. And this is the commitment of World Talent Economy Forum. We already working with many developing countries, prime minister office, parliament, planning ministries, and different important ministries. And we want to invite more parliamentarians in our debate, and hopefully through this process we can minimize the gap, and the developing nations politicians they also can learn how the developed worlds they do debate, how they develop policy, and how they can contribute for the developing world. So this is all about for today's discussion. I'm really impressed by today's debate. We want to arrange more debate because this is one of the format I believe that we can identify different issues and different strategy which will be helpful for the developing world. So thank you, honorable parliament members, Mr. Gannady, Mr. Rob, Mr. Donalds, Mr. Marshall, and Mr. Andreas, Mr. Paul, Mr. David Schumacher, and Honorable Speaker Dr. Talib Raphael for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, we already share our content with the Harvard University Debate Club, Oxford University Debate Club, Cambridge University Debate Club, World University Debate Organizing Committee. Perhaps this is the world largest debating communities, as well as World Schools Debating Championship. This is another largest debating community in social media and in real world. So hopefully our audience, they will learn different important aspects from today's debate. And beside that, from Malaysia International Islamic University, they have a world largest debate club. It's a IIUM Oratory Club. They produce many ministers in Malaysia. They also support World Talent Economy Forum initiative, and we want to arrange a debate in between AI and human. Hopefully, from our speakers, those who join today's parliament, we will fix the debaters and we will arrange this kind of debate. And we want to arrange a series of debate because debate is very popular in developing world, and this is the way how we can attract human being and how we can solve many complex problems. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, honorable speakers of today's parliament, for joining today's session. And thank you. Bye-bye and take care. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Live long and
Happy
prosper.
New Year.
Thank you.
All the
And
best.
just go up.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Happy New
Cheers.
Year.
Happy New Year.